Works for me.
Here we go. And we're live.
Yay.
Now we wait.
Well, we could start talking about things.
Or I could go to the restroom since no one's here.
Okay.
I should have done that before. Okay, I'm going to do that.
You want to go off there or stay on?
No, don't touch the off air button until the end, because that's where all the chaos happened last time. Hey guys, welcome to the webinar. Looks like we got some people already on. That's fabulous. And it's Vern.
Hey, good to be here.
Hey everybody. You guys, if you could just do us a favor and just make sure you can, of course, hear us and see us, that would be great. Comment in the chat for us. Over on the right-hand side on the very bottom, there's the chat roll down there. Type it up.
Do we have any comment?
They're getting on, so we got some more people signing in right now, so I just sent out a reminder email.
Good, excellent.
Welcome everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the webinar.
So if you want to swing the camera just a little more poster side. Yeah, nice. Perfect.
Like right there. Here, I'll just be over here. I'm kidding. Hey, Danny, thanks for coming on in. All right, Dan, it looks like they can hear us so far, so that's good. So I know we jumped on a little bit early here, so we thought we'd just kind of just, relax. We want this to be a really relaxing evening and just interview Vern and find out who he is, all that fun stuff. So has anybody here ever climbed with Vern? That's my question to everybody. Anyone ever, right?
Excellent.
Type answers in the chat. I'd be curious to know. So just so you guys know, so Vern and I can see each other. We cannot see all of you out there. So, but we can see your messages in the chat. So what we're hoping to do this evening is as we go along and I ask Vern some questions, we'll pause and I will reread the questions out of the chat. So I'm going to be looking at those in particular and reading them off to Vern to answer any questions you guys have.
You may have to explain that a couple of times.
Yep, I will. I'll do that.
We'll join us a little later.
Let's see. So if you guys could type into your chat down there on the bottom right-hand side, do you have a little cursor down there? If you could type in maybe where you're from and whether or not you guys have ever climbed with Vern before. So this is a challenge for me because I actually have never climbed with Vern. And I'm not even a climber. So this is kind of a funny story as to why I'm here this evening. So I have a fiance over here that climbed with Vern. and that is how I met Vern. So it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren went and climbed Island Peak, right, in October, last October.
And we were together for 3 weeks in Nepal, up along the Chinese border.
Nice.
So, yaks, Sherpas everywhere.
I couldn't figure out what the allure was. I'm not, I'm from Alaska, and come here, come in and do a cameo real quick. Here's Mr. Climber. So this guy, all right. So he's the reason Vern and I met each other, right?
Yep.
And
Pain and agony.
And where are you going in February?
Aconcagua.
With Vern.
Yep.
Again, so it's a good way for me to get rid of my fiance. All right, we got I don't either. We got a Florida person said no, I don't climb. I don't either, but I do day hike, and I am from Alaska, so I can appreciate a good day hike for sure. A trek, as it were, I guess not a climb. We got
Florida.
We got Jean. We got Jean saying hi from Rhode Island. We've got and so you guys have to forgive us for the time zone. So I'm in Seattle and Vern's in New York.
And Jean has climbed with me before.
Yes. Where did you guys climb?
We did Denali together.
Oh, Denali, nice. Nice. So we got a Danny from San Diego.
And if I remember correctly, Jean was the first American woman to climb some peak. Maybe she'll write us a little note and tell us where that was. So make sure you fill out the text and respondez-vous, por favor.
All right, somebody has their hand up. Let me see. Dan would like to speak. I'm going to let him ask you a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, Dan, I think we gave you the floor. I think. Maybe not. You have to forgive us. This is our first time in this program, so we're trying. We got Peter. He says he climbs and he ultra runs, and he hasn't climbed with Vern. And yeah, there's a first time. Oh, Jean. Oh, so it was Vincent. Mount Vincent.
Yes, the first American woman to climb up Vincent, the highest mountain in Antarctica.
Nice.
So thanks for joining us, Jean.
Yes.
She also happens to be like the hottest skier in all of Rhode Island.
Ooh.
#1 contender.
Nice. For Team USA or just?
I'm going to have to let her respond to that.
Peter, have you climbed with other guides? Have you gone anywhere else? And have you done any formal climbs? I would like to know that. That'd be interesting. So, and being a non-climber, getting introduced into this world, this was very interesting for me. All I knew is I had to get up early and drop Darren off at your. So Alpine Ascents that you work for, Vern, they're here in Seattle. So I always end up dropping Darren off either at the airport or at Alpine at 5 a.m.
At our office.
At your corporate office.
Excellent.
Or he would say, I have to be in Seattle for gear check. And I said, what is this gear check? What is going on over here? So if you're not a climber and you're not in your world, I'm in a different world. That's not my world. But I definitely can respect your world. So let's see. Jean says, great to see you. Vincent, Peter, he climbs in the ultra run. Peter, where have you done your ultra run at? Vern, you've done ultra runs, haven't you?
I have had a few long races in my life. I used to be an eco challenge racer. So those, it wasn't all running. I got to admit that some of it was boating, some of it was biking, some of it was on horseback, some of it was paddling. But sometimes the longest one I was involved with was a 9-day event. So I think I understand what ultra is all about.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure you do. Let's see who else we got over here.
It happens to be excellent training for mountaineering because you know how to endure lots of pain and agony, and you're able to go long, which is what it takes on the mountain.
Nice. You guys and your pain and agony. I know. Let's see, Vincent. Let's see, I've got some more people coming in here. So we got just a few more minutes before we get started formally, but so we want to thank you guys for coming out. This has been a challenge for many reasons, and it's kind of funny. I help Vern with his social media, so if you've seen anything weird, it was probably my fault. So it's always been a challenge, though. Vern is usually at the top of a mountain, out of cell phone range, and no signal, trying to send me photos and words so I can do posts and texts on social media on his behalf. Not always. He does some of his own, but it's been a real challenge with when we can't get a signal in half the world, and I can't keep track of him. He's usually 24 hours ahead somewhere, and I'm 2 days behind. And I'm like, are we on day 1 or 3 of the climb? I'm like, I don't even. I have a hard time keeping it.
This is quite foreign to me to be doing something that's high tech. But typically,
Yes.
the best we can do is like hand signals and maybe smoke and fire. But this is great that I'm able to talk to people across the country and probably some from different parts of the world.
Yep. So you're trying to get us to get on an agreeable time zone. That was the challenge too. I know everybody, Tuesday on a school night it's kind of pushing the envelope. But I want to thank everybody for coming out and taking time out of the other night to be with us. You might see I've got a special little poster back here in the background. There's a little something. Vern, why don't you tell us a little bit about this event, where this poster came from?
Last spring, I was involved with a class I was doing my avalanche, my Avi 2 certification up in North Conway. And North Conway's kind of a hub of skiers and climbers and outdoor enthusiasts. It's where Mount Washington's located. And while I was up there, they asked me to do a talk while I was there on my upcoming book, which now, of course, is out. But this is the poster that the gentleman at Northeast Mountaineering was able to draw up for me. And you can see it was in the Legends room, and pizza was provided. That's not,
well, yeah, that pizza.
It was back in March. But it was a good time. I filled the house. Jean was there, as a matter of fact, from
Nice.
Rhode Island. And she got a lot of her ski buddies to come out as well. So we had people standing in the aisles. It was great.
Nice.
Good fun.
Why don't you tell us, I know the significance of this pose, this picture right here. Why don't you tell us what that is?
Well, that's me at the top of the mountain, giving the thumbs up. I made the summit. So it's that one I think was probably Denali. I've got my big down suit on. It could have also been Vincent, where it's so cold that you have to use a down suit. I can't remember exactly where that photo was, but I know it was high and cold. So,
yeah. And so there's no one else there, right? So you're doing a selfie.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I think if you look closer, you can see my hand in the reflection of my goggles.
Yep.
That's a selfie on the summit. Summit selfie.
I had asked Vern, because I'm not familiar with like the nomenclature or whatever I'm gonna call it, when like the inner workings of these kinds of things. Like if you summit something, how does somebody know? Like, do you take you on your word? Is there like an internal website? I don't know. I didn't know how these things worked, and he assured me that it's kind of common to just take a picture, right? You take a picture and then
summit selfie.
Let word get out
on the top, especially if you got the mountains in the background. As you can see on the poster, you get background mountains, and then everybody knows that you're actually on the summit because they can tell from the photos.
Right.
The background mountains are indicating where you're located.
Nice. Just make sure you don't. Like, well, he started on Everest, but ended. I was kidding.
Lionel Tiré, which is a very famous French climber, actually was taking a photograph when he backed off the mountain and to his death, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
We know to be very careful when we're taking photographs. We don't want what we call Kodak courage, because if you get out there a little bit too far and you might plummet. As cliche and as comical as that sounds, it's ironic, but it actually has taken place on several occasions. So we have to be very careful with cameras and the top of the mountains, especially if it's a precarious ridge or a cornice situation.
Well, there's people dying in the mall. They fall into the water fountain,
Yeah.
let alone a mountain.
Right. So
Oh my
we've
God.
been we actually have a bad track record for those kind of accidents, so we take it to heart.
Nice. Well, looks like we're getting on top of 7 o'clock here, so hopefully everybody's starting to kind of come into the room. I'm going to quickly just reintroduce myself. My name is Sunny Heron. I helped Vern with his social media marketing, and I'm living here in Seattle, Washington. And I met Vern through my fiance, who went on a climb with him last year through Alpine Ascents to Nepal, Island. I always forget Island Peak, and he just disappeared for 5 weeks, and I didn't know what he was doing. And then I met Vern in December when you came through for something, and then we've been friends ever since. And I've been helping him grow his social media platform and helping you with your book launch that just came out. So, but this is tonight's way more than just about a book. For anybody who doesn't know Vern or know the backstory here, I'm hoping you're going to be just as amazed as I was when I heard it for the first time. He's got an incredible origin story, like an X-Men. It's an incredible start. It's an amazing middle, and I know, thank goodness it hasn't ended, but I know it's going to be great. So, Vern, you've been, from what I know, you've been guiding professionally now for over 40 years, so yes. 4 decades, right?
And 4 decades.
4 decades. Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you began climbing and what I call your origin story is?
Well, the first thing I should do is give you a little background. I grew up in Texas, in Houston. As you know, it's very flat, holds a lot of water, as we just found out. But for me, there was not a lot of challenge in this very flat place. So I hit the road really early. I kind of ran away from home as a young man and ended up hitchhiking all over the United States, but ultimately across Canada. And then I got a ride into Alaska. My 3rd day in the state, I saw Denali in all of its glory and fell in love with it and decided at that moment that I was going to climb it. And sure enough, it ultimately came to pass, but I had to spend 5 years learning the basics of snow camping, crevasse rescue, hypothermia, how to cook in the cold, how to stay dry in the snow. For me, there's a steep learning curve. Coming from Texas was challenging. I fell in love with Denali, and then for the next 5 years, I climbed everything I could climb. I was like climbing 2 or 3 times a week, running out on the weekends, going up in the afternoon. After work, I'd run to the top of some of the smaller peaks all around Anchorage, Alaska.
Yep.
And then
in there.
Ultimately was able to after I worked on the pipeline as a laborer, removing snow, if you will.
Oh my gosh.
I had a lot of work in that winter in Valdez, which gets about
20
feet. So when I had a little jingle in my pocket, I signed up for a trip. I actually went as a client. Fortunately, I went with an excellent guide, and he inspired me to get involved with guiding, which I've been doing ever since.
Nice. Now your accomplishments are very long and lengthy, so I'm just going to read off a few for everybody, and correct me if I get them wrong. Okay. I have that you are the first person to do a historic solo ascent of Mount McKinley in the winter of 1988. So it's not that it was the first one in the winter of 88. It was that it was in the winter. Correct?
Right? I was the first person to solo it in the winter.
In the winter by yourself, which we'll talk about in a minute, because that is just an incredible story. And help me out here. Where's your you help me? You have a speed record, don't you? Going up. You have a couple speed records.
Yeah, as a guide, we don't like to go fast. It's the way you get hurt at altitude. But when I'm not guiding, when I'm on my own, a lot of times I like to push my limit and see how fast I can go. I do have a couple records, but one that it kind of worked on for several years was trying to do all 7 summits twice in 1 year, in one 365-day period. And I was only able to do that on my 3rd attempt. So that's a little, it's crazed. But the other one is the fastest elapsed time. I set the record at 134 days, starting on Vincent and ultimately ending up on Denali and everything in between. So the 7 summits being the 7 highest point on each continent.
Right. And I just would like to list these off for everybody so we can kind of get dialed in on this. So what is the other record that Vern holds right now is he's the only person in the world to have summited all 10 summits. 7, sorry. See, I'm already getting it wrong. 7 summits more than 10 times each. So, and each of the summits is the highest point on each continent. So not only do you have, geographical issues, you've got financial, things to work out. And it sounds like in order to get credit for it in your world, you have to do it within a calendar year, right?
Well,
or to be known for it. So I'm going to list off the 7 summits that we have right here that are, it's the highest peak on every continent. So in no particular order, we have Aconcagua in Argentina, right? South America.
The highest in South America.
Highest in South America. We've got Denali in Alaska, formerly known as Mount McKinley, if anybody is not up on that, but we call it Denali in this room. Mount Elbrus, which is the highest point in Russia. We've got Everest. I think everybody knows about Everest, but over in Nepal. We got Karsten's Pyramid in Indonesia. Mount Vinson in Antarctica, and Kilimanjaro in Africa. So if you kind of think about that for a minute, as far as geographically, Nepal, Alaska, Russia, I mean, that's incredible to not only just do it.
Just the logistics of traveling to that many continents in that time frame and then climbing was pretty overwhelming. But with a little bit of luck and a whole lot of good weather, we were able to pull it off. So a lot of people, the 7 summits is like it's a lifelong project. They spend years. I think the one guy's been over 30 years to climb all 7 of them. But to try to compress it was logical for me because I do it as a profession. So I'm actually going to most of those every year. Even today, I still do 5 or 6 of those summits every year. So it's was kind of it wasn't easy, but it was
kind of
because I was doing them anyway as for work, so I might as well pick up the pace a little bit, and tighten up the time frame, and catch a lot of jets, and I could actually have completed all of them in a very short time frame.
Well, that leads us into a really great story I've got saved for you guys from Vern. I can't wait for you guys to hear this. So Vern, you were awarded a Hall of Fame. You were inducted into the Alaska Sports Hall of Fame for your solo ascent of Denali in the winter of 1988. And Alaska recognizes that as a feat of athleticism. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that entire trip and why Alaska gave you such an honor?
Once I started climbing Denali, once I fell in love with it, all good things have come from that. About my 12th ascent, I decided I was going to try to climb it in the wintertime. I was inspired by famed Japanese climber Naomi Yoramura, who died up there actually climbing it in the wintertime. He soloed it first, but he never came down. I was in Japan when he was pronounced lost, and I saw this great outpouring of grief on his behalf from the people of Japan, which was amazing to me that a climber had struck this chord with the common people in Japan. I remember a little lady pulling my lapels down into her face, and she said, "Where is Naomi?" And kind of set a hook. I was like, wow, this man had a great appeal
Wow.
to his fellow countrymen. So when I finished my tour around the world, I came back to Alaska and I started thinking, I said, yeah, I'd love to do this. So 4 years later, actually, after guiding on Aconcagua in South America, I was acclimatized. I came north out of their summer in February, middle of February. Lowell Thomas Jr., great pilot, also our lieutenant governor at one time, the son of Lowell Thomas Sr., who is amazing, adventurous spirit, a newscast announcer, newsreel announcer back in those days. But anyway, he flew me in. He came back from Hawaii, flew me to the mountain, and put me out with, I think I had 16 days of food, and I figured I'd climb it in 12 days. It was cold, yes. Had to take psychological advantage, physical advantage of taking a ladder, which I wore around my waist. It extended 6 feet in front of me, 6 feet behind me, and was connected to my sled. And I also carried a pack, and I would trudge every day as many miles as I could before it got dark and cold. So I was able to make maybe 2-3 miles a day. I was moving about 200 pounds a year, 150 at least, as it got lighter. But right at the beginning, it was close to 200 pounds. That meant you couldn't go very fast and couldn't go very far. The idea with the ladder was that if I stepped into a crevasse, the ladder would bridge from one side to the other side, and then I could extricate myself and crawl across the ladder to safety. Fortunately, I also had skis on. The only time I broke through, the skis kept me out. And then I magically levitated off of the crevasse. I told you, I took 16 days worth of food, but I was up there for 29 days. The weather was horrendous that year, and we ended up with storm, low pressure, high wind, snowfall, day after day. I think I actually only did climb 12 days, but the rest of the time I couldn't climb. I was pinned down by this very inclement weather. So I passed my time inside my snow cave, twiddling my thumbs, repairing my gear with my needle and thread, playing my harmonica, listening to it. I took a radio, so I also got to listen to the weather reports on the radio. And they kept on telling me it was going to be bad weather. I listened every morning. I'd listen to see if the wind was howling outside. If it wasn't howling, then I actually crawled out of my cave, dug myself out of the cave, put my gear on as fast as I could before I got froze to death, and I'd sprint to my next location and repeat. But it seemed like I'd do that one day, and then I'd get 2 days of bad weather. Do it again for 1 day, 2 days of bad weather. One of the things one has to do is ration your food, ration your fuel. If you know you're going to go long, which it was pretty obvious halfway through it, I started going to half rations and not allowing myself to waste any fuel, just heating water just to drink. I just had to keep it for cooking and melting. I couldn't actually drink hot water. Every day, if you ration half every day, you never run out of food. You just get smaller and smaller quantities. So it got to the point where I was getting pretty low on food. I was high enough on the mountain. I didn't want to quit, but I started realizing that my life was in jeopardy. The fuel being more critical actually than the food, because the fuel is water and water is life. So that became a real big issue until I got to 16,000 feet. And I was digging my snow cave one day, and one day it was about day 20. And I was very fortunate. I dug into a cache that somebody had left there the year before, and it was filled full of sweet and sour, freeze-dried pork. And that's all that was in there, but there was lots of it. And I shouldn't say all. There was lots of fuel in there too, several cans of fuel. And so I was able to cook to my heart's content and eat lots of sweet and sour pork, Chinese dinner. Gosh. And I was able to subsist on that. To this day, I still can't eat sweet and sour pork, but I was able to have plenty of water, plenty of food, which kept me throughout the duration of the trip allowed me to get to the summit on a day that was, I would never go to the summit on, but it was my only hope to, because the wind had dropped and it was cloudy and snowing. But without the wind, I was able to move. So I ran to the summit, came back down, and I got on the radio and talked to my pilot and said, I made it. Can you come get me?
I got to do a selfie real quick, and then you can come get me.
I had to do it from high on the mountain because the radio signal wouldn't get out when I was at base camp. So I had to call him when I was high. He said, you've got 3 days before a big storm comes in. Get down there, I'll pick you up. So as typical in Alaska, the weather is not forecastable. Right. And the next day, the storm came in. I got pinned at 11,000 feet in Kahiltna Pass and dug a cave. I was in there going like, oh, I'm out of food now. Well, not quite. I have one candy bar left. It's miserable conditions. I can't ski in this kind of weather. It just didn't knocking me down. So I held up and turned on my radio and was listening to the weather forecast. And lo and behold, they're interviewing my pilot on the radio I was listening to, on the same station I was listening to. And he said, well, Lowell, where do you think Vern is located? He says, well, I think he must have been able to get down to Kahiltna Pass before the storm hit him. And I'm going like, yes, I'm in Kahiltna Pass. He says, he's probably holed up in a cave. And I go, yes, I'm in a cave. He's probably running low on food. And I'm going, yes, I'm down to one candy bar.
Bring me a cheeseburger.
At that point, he told me that he told the audience, but in essence, he was actually telling me because I was listening to it. He said that he'd left his survival rations, and pilots always carry food rations with them when they go flying in Alaska because they never know when they're going to get put down by the weather. So he left his survival rations for me at base camp.
Oh my God.
And that was like, water in the desert for me. I was just like, oh yeah, I got food down there. Great. So even though it was still storming, I was able to break camp and push on. Fortunately, as I dropped down lower on the mountain, the winds weren't as strong, and I was able to ski all the way to base camp. And I found his rations at base camp, and
that's so amazing. I mean, this story.
Not only was there fuel there, but there was food. But pilots seem to have weird taste. He left a dozen little sausages, smoky silters, and he had 5 pounds of peanuts in the shell.
Oh, no spam? That's an Alaska thing, yeah.
But that's what he left me. But it worked out really well because the sausage was full of fat, which I desperately needed.
Oh, yeah.
And the peanuts were so difficult to eat, I couldn't bolt them. So I had to take my time, and which was fortuitous because I was there for 3 more days before the weather cleared enough where he could come pick me up.
So I just wanted to tell everybody too, if they don't already know, this particular ascent that we're talking about, Vern wrote a book about it a long time ago. A long time ago. I'm not sure what year you did this, but this first book is called Dangerous Steps. This breaks down his account of the entire summit from start to finish, and it's got details that Vern's just forgetting or not leaving out right now, like the part where you had another competitor show up on the mountain to try and beat you. The part where you didn't take a tent because you wanted to live in a snow shelter instead. The part where you found all the food. You guys, this is an amazing read. If you can get a hold of one. I'm not sure how many copies are still in print, Vern, but I know we're talking about re-releasing it. And you guys, but it's fun because he breaks down day by day what happened on his journey. It's just, when I read this book, I was like, it just made I could hardly put it down.
I want to mention that's my story as told to Lou Freeman. So
yes.
Lou's the author on there. Trying to find the book. It's Dangerous Steps by Lou Freeman.
Right. Yes. Yeah, but it's your story. It is your story. Yes.
Nobody else would claim
it. No one else is crazy. Not yet. And that's what I want to also say too is with Vern's accomplishments. Some of them are forever, emblazoned, but some, right? Other people can still break your records, right? I mean, not to take.
Records are made to be
Aaron's
broken.
laughing.
Records are made to be broken. I don't think anybody in their right mind would ever want to try to climb the 7 summits twice in 365 days. It's that's more than a labor of love. That's insanity.
Right. So you've set records that no one. Okay. Oh, my bad. All right. So let's check the chat for a second. You've got some. Yes. Oh shoot. Whose name is it? I can't see. I got a little thing over the top. I think it's Alberto or Alameda. Excuse me. Yes. Re-release. Yes, we are actually secretly working on a movie version. I didn't want to release that yet because we don't know. We've been trying to convince Vern to go for. We think it'd be an amazing, amazing movie for sure. It was art. Yes. So Alberto, love. I'm just gonna read off some stuff here. Art says amazing story. Alberto, love Denali, so majestic range. Also, yes. Danny says that is a great book. Yes, it's a. We're looking to re-release it on either a brand new version with bonus chapters or re-release it onto Kindle. That's a side project I'm working on with Vern because we need to get the digital copy out there. We got a question. What summit is most difficult to access? Karsten's Pyramid question? What? So
yeah, well, that's a good question. To access, Karsten's has been for many, many years a 6-day walk through the jungle. So you start at 7,000 feet, you work your way up through tropical jungles of New Guinea, and as you go, it gets colder and colder, and the trees get smaller and smaller, and you eventually work your way out to alpine tundra, which typically, the times I've done it 3 times now, gets wet, snowy, and windy as the farther you go. So a week of approach in the wet, snow, rain, wind, it's pretty awkward. Fortunately, we've got some great local indigenous porters that carry loads, heavy loads for days through the jungle and making it I mean, we wouldn't be able to do it on our own. It would make it like probably a 3-week ordeal to get everything up there. But so that's why I say it's difficult. We can reverse it on the way out. We usually can get out in about 4 days. But you're mud up to your waist. You're slashing through trees. There's logs that climb across. There's things to dodge underneath. So it's a real workout. By the time you get there, a lot of people are pretty beat up. Of course, then there's the very remote Vinson, probably one of the most remote mountains on Earth. Expensive, so you got to work a long time before you go to Vinson to get the money. So that one's hard because it's so expensive to get down there, over 40K. So it's challenging on that level. Yeah, wow. So those are the 2 that come to mind when you say which is the harder to access. I'd say it's a toss-up between those 2.
We have a question coming in from Ginger. She, back on the 7th summit, she'd asked, what about the mountain in Australia?
Yes.
What does that mean?
If anybody knows that. So there are actually 8 summits because there's a dispute about which is a continent, and I think it gets into semantics, but some people say that Australia is a continent by itself. Some people say Australasia, it's bigger and incorporates part of New Guinea. And if Australasia is a continent, then Karsten's Pyramid, the one I just mentioned, you have to go through the jungle, that becomes the highest. If you only look at Australia as being the landmass itself as being a continent, then Kosciuszko, which is only 7,000 feet, is the highest on that 7th continent. So most people now, they actually do 8 peaks to make sure there's no dispute whether or not they got to that. So,
and you've already, I don't even have to ask this, right? You've done it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So yeah, so she's got a great one-liner. It seems like you've climbed 8 of the 7 summits. I love that.
But that's what's you have to do these days.
Let's see. So Jeff Ragusa has a question. He says, Vern, a brief look shows that you're on big mountains every week over the next year. How do you stave off injury? That's a great question.
Jeff, thanks. That is a good question. Actually, we get injured. We have, I have to stay trained up all the time. I just went running this morning. Did yoga the day before. When I'm in the field, we like to say the best training for climbing is climbing. So staying in the field, staying active, getting out and moving in an environment that is mountainous is probably the best way to stay trained up. Also, I tend to be a little bit conservative. I don't push myself like I did when I was in my youth. I use walking poles that saves my knees. Try to look ahead, try to anticipate what the weather's going to do. Try not to go any place close to avalanches. I've lost more people, more friends to avalanches than any other cause in life. So how do you avoid those things? You actually have to use some self-control and some discipline to make conservative decisions, Jeff. So excellent question.
Right. So, and you also, like Darren was explaining, I'm sure if everybody's a climber here, I'm not sure if you are in the chat, but he was explaining about summit fever. So, I mean,
summit fever is a psychological condition of getting so enamored with getting to the top that the goal becomes your full focus. And it's dangerous because you stop making good choices. You're trying to get to the point where you just want to make the top, and you don't care if you're going to lose your fingers. You don't care if you're going to get hypothermic, and it's dangerous. It's something that, as a guide, we look for early stages of that in our climbers, because if they have that, they're not going to be telling you when when they're feeling tired, when they're feeling cold, and it's very important that you don't let them take you in because they have summit fever. Summit fever has probably killed more than its share of climbers. So we have to be very careful to be balanced. It gets back to what I was talking with Jeff about, is making conservative decisions, how you keep from getting in positions where you're going to get hurt to begin with.
Nice. Yeah. Be careful. Let me see. We got art. Yeah, movie. MK says, I just climbed Kilimanjaro. I'm looking for my next challenge.
Good one.
After
Kilimanjaro is one of the easier of the 7 summits because we have borders there. We've got a nice trail that goes right to the top. The next one I would recommend for you, MK, is Elbrus, which is the highest mountain in Europe. It's in Russia, right between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. And it's a snow-covered peak, which means you're going to be on crampons, you're going to be using ice axe, potentially dealing with crevasses, much colder than Kilimanjaro. But at the same time, it too is a volcano, so it's a lower angle mountain. And because of that, it doesn't have the technical challenges of being too severe. So that's not to say people don't die there. They do. But if you are conservative, make good choices, and don't go in bad weather, and turn back if the weather changes, which it can do quite quickly. Like I mentioned, between the Caspian and the Black Sea there, you can get lots of wind and lots of moisture moving quickly. But it's the next, I would say, second in the 7 summits if you're making a logical progression.
Okay.
My recommendation.
You would know. Scott says, what inspires you to keep climbing? Many people make a life goal out of climbing the 7 summits once. You kept climbing. Can you share any training insights, daily routines, resources, etc.? So a little bit of overlap on the other question, but
sure.
A little bit different too.
I think what keeps me motivated, Scott, is just the love of sharing with other people. The mountains are, once you've been up Denali 57 times, the mountain is pretty similar each time, but the people are different. And I learned so much from my mentors, from my early guides, from the older guys in the community, in the mountaineering club, the older guys in the mountain rescue team would share their knowledge with this young Texan upstart. And I feel now it's my turn to give back. So teaching and showing people what I've learned over the last 4 decades is kind of my reason for still going out in the mountains. I enjoy it immensely. Love the mountains, love being outdoors, but the real gratification for me is giving that to other people.
Yeah.
The other aspect of your question, if I gleaned it correctly, was training regimen. I very strongly believe that you should make your training fun. And for me, I was out on my ripstick. It's sort of like a skateboard with only 2 wheels instead of 4 wheels. I was out on that earlier this evening, right before it got dark, just kicking around the neighborhood. Went running this morning. Like to unicycle, like to hike. Speed hiking is fun. Mr. Almeida can tell you about that. But those things are joyful. And if I'm enjoying myself, I'm going to do it. And if I do it, I stay trained out. So that's the key. For me, I couldn't go to the gym and just stay on a treadmill for hours. It'd drive me crazy. But I know a lot of people can, or maybe that's the only thing they can do because they live and work in a big city, and that's the only thing that's easily accessible. Understood. And there's some very strong climbers have trained that way. But for me, need to be outdoors and doing something that's moving and uplifting at the same time.
Vern, take us back to the
legs and lungs.
Take us back to your origins for a minute. I forgot to bring up one of your beginning stories of. Tell us about the time when. Well, tell everybody what you did as a sport growing up, and then tell them about the Boy Scouts.
Sure. In my younger life, I grew up as a competitive swimmer. I started, I think, when I was 7 years old, all the way up to when I was 17. I swam lots of times, twice a day, competitively, hour and a half in the morning, hour and a half in the evening. This is a great way to develop legs and lungs, which I just mentioned. You're kicking hard, you're breathing, you've got great cardiovascular energy. I didn't realize how well trained I was until I joined Boy Scouts. And I was very fortunate. I got selected to go to Philmont Boy Scout Ranch in New Mexico, which is a big deal to leave Texas and go up into the real mountains. I'm flat Gulf Coast plains of Houston up into the mountains. And one of the things we were able to do is climb the 3rd highest mountain in New Mexico. As we started up, everybody in high spirits, the altitude, the carrying the backpack, all started taking its toll. And pretty soon we noticed that the scout leaders were kind of falling off the back of the pack. And then some of the bigger kids were falling behind. And then it was just some of the younger, lighter guys like myself up in the lead. And then finally, they were all behind me. And I just felt this amazing feeling of like, wow, I'm a natural. I can do this. But it was actually because I'd been for 6 years before that, I'd been training 3 hours a day aerobically.
Right.
And in May, we used to swim 100 miles in the month, and that's
my gosh,
like 3 hours a day. That's a lot of mileage, especially for a young person. And
for anybody.
You asked me, so this gave me a leg up. I was able to have a great experience in the mountains. For my first mountain experience, I was standing on top, waiting for the rest of to catch up with me, and feeling like, wow, I'm a natural climber. So I think that set the hook. And,
for sure.
I think going back ever since.
An early victory for sure. And so there was an ebook that you put out earlier this year So I don't know if everybody here knows about it or if they had a chance to download it, but I'm going to put it into the chat for you guys also right now before I forget. But in the ebook, Vern talks about, okay, I'm going to publish this. So you don't have to re-opt in or anything. It should be just, you just click the link and hopefully you guys can see that right there. You just click the link and you can just download the PDF there. But one thing, Vern, that you talk about is the aerobic conditioning and what helps you summit. There was a whole bunch of information on oxygen. That was, when I read that, I wasn't.
Good. More is better.
More is
It's one of my favorite saying. But this book is actually the ebook. It's a compilation of all the little tricks and tips that I've learned over the last 4 decades of how to climb altitude. So if anybody out there is interested in getting 40 years of experience and a very readable short crib notes, if you will, cheat sheet, the cheats for altitude climbing is in this book, and it'll give you a real good basics on not only the physiology involved, but also the psychology and the way to train for it and things to look for. A lot of tips, guide tips, secrets, things that we have been exposed to with over thousands of climbers. And these are things that I want to give back. I mentioned I like to teach. This is part of my trying to give it back to the public. How can I benefits man's knowledge? How can I further that? And this is one of the ways is to give you all the tips that I have learned over the last 40 years.
In 15 pages. No, I'm kidding. What I'd like to point out here too, probably I didn't know, well, I learned about this. That's actually Vern on the cover, you guys. So that's a picture of him. Can you see that, Vern? Can you see the cover on your screen? That's
but I know the picture.
Yeah, you know the picture I'm talking about. So hopefully, I'm gonna bop into the chat for a second and make sure you guys can see that. Let me. Can you guys just comment for me? Were you able to see that when I put that up? That was the first time I've done that. Anybody? Yeah, Scott says legs and lungs. Love it. Yeah, for sure. Janice says Philmont is great. Alberto, Vern, tell me about the best food for Denali you recommend. You can see the cover. Okay, great. And you guys, I don't want you to, okay, all the comments are rolling in, thanks. I forget there's a 10-second delay from when I talk, and I'm like, oh, how come they're not answering? So I have to remember that. But I'm going to put it back up for a few more minutes, so if you guys want to download it. But don't stress about it, because I'll send it out to you guys there'll be a replay link. And in the link, I'll also put a second link in there for the book. So you don't have to worry about downloading it right now. Stuart says, yes, a great read. Thanks for sharing. There you go. Priya says, yes. Janice says, yes. Janice says, yes. Ginger says, we can cover.
I'd like to answer the question about what's the best food for Denali.
Yes, what is the best food for Denali?
A lot of people go with the freeze-dried or the super dehydrated. That stuff is great for about the first 5 days. It's light, it's easy to cook, it's easy to get rid of, but it's expensive. It's got a lot of packaging that you have to deal with. It's not very sustaining. If you read how many calories is in a packet, it's a 2-man packet and it probably has 1,000 calories in it. So crazy. That's a meal. We're burning 5,000-6,000 calories a day. So we have to eat things that are only nutritious. They got to be delicious, and they've got to be energy packed. They've got to be just. So I like to eat the same kind of stuff I would at home. I like to do eggs. I like to do bacon, pancakes, French toast, and then in dinner time I like stews of spaghettis.
You're making me hungry. I haven't had dinner. I'm hungry.
It's the same way with training. Is you got to make it fun, and it's the same thing for the food. If you don't like it, you're not going to eat it. And you have to eat it. With no fuel. There's no fire. There's no fire with no fuel. Anyway.
Yeah. However that thing goes.
If you don't put food in, you're not going to be able to put energy out. So you got to make it edible stuff that's it's actually multi-pronged. Not only to be nutritious and delicious, it's got to have variety, and you've got to be able to have easy cooking and easy cleanup, and not too much garbage produced in the process. So it's challenging, but that's one of these things you refine with experience. And there are books out there you can grab that from, but find an old timer who's been out in the mountains a lot, and he'll give you his favorite recipe, and you can pick up quite a lot for just watching what other people are doing. People have been there longer than you have.
So
That's what I did when I first moved.
Maybe the other part of the question, maybe as I'm reading it a little differently, because he says, considering the time, what do you recommend considering the time it takes to stay weight and for preparation? So do you normally carry your own food? I mean, do you, on the guided trips, do you guys always have your meals, or do you pre-make your own food, I guess is my question, before you climb and take your own? Or
we spend days packing it, and then once we get to the mountain, each of us have about 60 pounds of group gear. That's not only food, but that's fuel too. But that's a lot of weight. But you think about it, food, fuel, and tent, I should say, in there. Those things, without them, psychologically and physiologically, you cannot climb that mountain unless you have some technique of getting that energy into your body. So it's worth going slow, bringing the whole kitchen sink with you, if you will, to make sure that you've got the sustenance that's necessary to endure the challenges. Once you get to high altitude, it gets super cold, and if you don't have some calories on board, you're going to freeze. Hypothermia is a killer of the unprepared and the unfed.
Right. So when I was first watching Darren climb with you guys on Island Peak last year, I was reading the blog post when they were getting updated. There's one that I just absolutely love, and it was, Darren will know this one. You guys had stopped off, I think, at a tea house at Tangboche or something, or like a bake. I don't know what I'm talking about. A bakery somewhere, and their blog post said, "Oh, we ate muffins and cookies and tea and espresso," and I thought, what the heck are you guys doing? I want espresso. What are you doing? What are you doing?
That's before we got to the climb. One of the great things that has happened, and some people could say it's a terrible thing, but one of the great things that's happened in the Khumbu, with tourism being the main income, is we are catered to. And because of that, there are the tea houses have coffee, they've got eggs, they've got delightful dishes of Nepal, but they offer a wide variety of Western dishes as well. And you can actually put on some weight when you're up there trekking. But that's before we get to the climb. So Island Peak is really fat getting to it, and once we get on the mountain, everything goes on our backs. It becomes an ordeal, and we don't eat quite so well once we get on the hill. It's ramen noodles and for breakfast, and granola and some hot drinks, and that's it's the variety is no longer there. But fortunately, it's once you get acclimatized, the climb itself actually goes quite rapidly, and so we're up and down before you really notice your nutrition falling off. You're back down to camp and eating more muffins and.
Vern, that reminds me. Explain to me, because I just remembered something. I've noticed a lot of your ascents. You guys get up at 3 or 2 in the morning, and then you go when it's still dark. What is that all about? What is that?
Yeah, that's called an alpine start, and the whole idea there is to get up and get back down before the avalanche conditions get too bad, before the snow warms up and falls, or before the afternoon storms come in. So the whole idea is to get back, or at least be heading down when things hit the fan. You certainly don't want to be close to the top of the mountain in a snowstorm or in a thunderstorm. Lightning is
okay.
So that's the whole idea, is get up and get back down. For Everest, we actually start the day before. We actually leave probably at 11 o'clock at night to get back down, to make sure that we're back to high camp before it gets dark and cold. When it gets dark and cold, if you've been out for 18 hours, you're hammered. there's no way you can carry enough water and food to last much longer than that. So you want to get back in 14 hours or less if you can. But I've seen people come down in the dark, and it's very dangerous. I mean, that's what happened into thin air. Was they got so delayed. There's several delays that happened. Then the weather turned horrendous, and they actually trapped people until they're coming down in the dark, and they got lost. Most of the people didn't. One group in particular did not find their way back to camp. They had to be rescued, and you don't want to spend the night out at 26,000 feet. It's a bitter place. It's called the death zone for a reason.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got Greg says, Vern, I had the chance to climb Elbrus with you a number of years ago. It was the first time you climbed the East Summit in addition to the West Summit. I guess for even someone like you, there's still always something new. Do you have anything you wished you had done but never got around to it, or anything you still plan to do? Oh, great question, Greg.
Yes. Well,
he's got a bucket list.
It seems like it's a revolving list. As soon as you tick one off, there's something else that comes up. But I've got several projects I'm interested in continuing with. One of them's to climb the second highest peak in Antarctica. It's a mountain called Tyree. It's almost the same height as Vinson, but a few feet shorter, but much more challenging. It's only been climbed 8 times, whereas Vinson gets climbed 8 times in a day by different groups. So to do that would be a real notch on my belt, if you will. And so that's what I'm trying to nibble away at some of these bigger projects. But the challenge is going someplace that's very remote, very expensive, without guiding it. So I'm looking for somebody. If anybody wants to go climb Tyree, holler, give me a call. We'll get things going.
I think Darren just said something. Let's see here. We've also got Quasi says, Vern, for the speed ascent of Aconcagua and Denali, what were your starting points? Or maybe where were your starting points?
Yeah, base camp. Yep. You got to start at base camp to be official, and you got to actually tag the top. So that's the challenge. I have done Aconcagua from the road to the summit and back to the road in 3 days. I've also done from the road, head to the top of Kilimanjaro and back in 15 hours and 45 minutes. So there's challenges still out there, and that's what I do after I've become acclimatized. And I sometimes I'll work a mountain and then I'll go back up and do a speed solo. But it's typically they're always measured either from the road head or from base camp.
Okay, I have a question. I just thought of something. Sorry, guys. No, you've got some really great questions in the chat here. I'll get them in just a second. You told me a story about climbing Kilimanjaro, I think, and then jumping off. Tell that story, please, because I just don't do you justice.
Actually, Kilimanjaro, I haven't jumped off of, but I have jumped off. I've flown off with a paraglider off of several of the 7 summits. So I've flown off the top of Denali. I've flown off the top of Vinson. I've flown off the top of Kosciuszko. So these are all the highest points on the continent, and was the first person to take a paraglider off of Elbrus as well, which is the highest mountain in Europe. So paragliding actually kind of seemed to be invented in Europe, but I was lucky to do it early. A lot of getting back to Greg saying
just like the squirrel suit, right? They just jump off of it, and
this is what the squirrel suit guys ultimately use for their landing gear is a ram or a parachute, very similar to a paraglider. So instead of you have to have a very steep mountain to take a squirrel suit off of, but volcanoes you have to fly off and fly away in a paraglider or hang glider or something of that nature. So anyway, 4 of the 7 summits I've flown off the top of. I'd like to do the rest. So another
There you
goal,
go.
another a little box on my list that I haven't ticked yet would be to fly off of Kilimanjaro. I have flown off 22,000 feet off the top of Aconcagua, but I haven't gone from the summit yet. So that one still
There you go.
is out there, and I haven't flown off the top of Everest. So a couple of things to look forward to. I have some interest in the people who want to fly off of Everest. So hopefully that'll come to pass the next couple of years.
We got some comments over here real quick. It says, Ginger says next book should be a cookbook. Yum. I agree. I was just thinking that when we got to talking, we'll have to work on that.
Yeah, I mean, my stomach agrees, but right now I'm trying to have adventures outdoor rather than indoor.
Let's see. Dean has a great question. What order would you recommend climbing the 7 summits, easiest to hardest?
I would start with Kilimanjaro because it's ordered, and even though there is some snow up at the top, it's pretty much a non-snow peak. Then I'd go with Elbrus, and believe it or not, from there I'd probably go to Aconcagua, even though it's high. It's almost 23,000 feet. It's got good routes on it, and there's also porters working on it now these days. So that would be the first 3. From there, I think you could also get somewhere in that very early list. You could do the highest in Australia. So if you're going to do 8 of the 7 summits, I'd stick Australia, the Kosciuszko, in the first 3 or 4 mountains. It's actually the easiest of the bunch, but its alter ego, Karsten's Pyramid, is actually the most technical of all of them. But somewhere in there, I go Denali, Karsten's, and then start looking at Vinson and Everest. Vinson's not too technically difficult, but it's very remote and very expensive. So most people would save that till 5 or 6 in the series. And then Everest, because it's the most climactic, if you will. Once you get to that point, everything else would be anticlimactic. So a lot of people save that for the end, but also because they need to gain the experience of the earlier mountains before they feel confident and know how to physically train for something as hard as Everest. So Everest is usually the epitome. It makes sense. And maybe Kilimanjaro or Kosciuszko being the beginning points.
Okay, great. We've got some feedback over here in the chat. Says Danny says, this is so cool. Talk about a great show. I would have a TV if this was the stuff that's on. Thank you for doing this. Danny, thank you. That's a compliment. We appreciate that for sure.
I think it is a great compliment.
I think we probably all feel the same way about television here, except for some Game of Thrones, of course, but you know. Quasi says, thanks, Sunny and Vern. Great show going on. Appreciate it. Thank you, Quasi. We try. This is new for both of us, so we're just kind of trying to get there. Richard, which might be my father. You are in great shape. Can you confirm your age? Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
Secret.
Never kiss and tell. Come on.
Yeah, let's just say that. Yeah, I'm 64.
He's 21 and holding. Come on.
No, the mountains have treated me very, very well. It's the lifestyle of staying active, carrying a big pack for days, going up mountains. I'm going up next week on Rainier. It'll be the 10th big mountain that I've done. It's actually one of the smallest of the mountains that I've done this year. It'll be the 10th expedition I'm on this year. And I've got a couple more coming up before the year's over. So you figure a mountain a month. Some of them are big mountains. Keeps you young, keeps you in good shape.
What is it, Vern? This is my question. What is it like? So you live in New York. So what's it like going into all these rural, third world places and eating, normal? I wouldn't say normal food, but like organic foods, and then coming back to New York lifestyle. I mean, not that you're in downtown New York by any means, but you know what I'm trying to get at. Like, what is that like for you?
Well, it's a high contrast lifestyle. I mean, I can see it from both ends really. Uh, I get to go to fine restaurants when I want to, have the intensity of the city, go to museums, go to art shows, and then there's also, you're trying not to step in the poop on the trail. Uh, you're making sure you
Yeah.
wash your hands twice before you eat because things are so bizarre in these third world countries. Uh, but the contrast for me is exciting. It keeps my mind stimulated. It keeps me. Uh, I mean, I love to travel because I
Yeah.
learn so much that way. So yes, it's so the pendulum swinging back and forth, but it keeps good time. And for me, it is a good time to just see it from both sides.
And I know I'm especially really fortunate to catch you for more than a week. You guys have less than a week to catch him between trips. And it's just, I usually get about this much time. He's so hard to book time. So I'm so thankful you're here. We do have some announcements though, especially if we have anybody in the Seattle area next week. Anybody in the chat here from Seattle or surrounding areas? If there's anybody in there, give me a heck yeah. So Vern's going to be here next week, you guys, and we're doing, he's the star, not me. I don't mean we as the assistant. We're doing 2 book signings next week for him. The first one, I believe, is it Wednesday, Vern? Wednesday at Feathered Friends, right?
No, Wednesday's the 27th, and that'll be at Alpine Ascents at
Okay.
6 o'clock. And then on the 28th, I'm doing a signing at Feathered Friends, and we're getting a lot of interest in that show.
Yes.
So sign up early so we can make sure we got enough chance for everybody.
And you guys, I'm going to be helping them with their social media to help get the word out as well. So I can leave a link if you guys, or if you're near here and want to stop by. We've got it's a book signing to promote Vern's new book that we haven't talked about yet. So so you'll be doing an in-house lecture and book signing at both locations.
That is correct.
And then
that's 6:30 at the Feathered Friends, downtown main store.
And Feathered Friends, for those who don't know, or if you're from here, not sure where it's at, it's across the street from the flagship REI on that same frontage road, right up the street there. So they're their own little a climbing company that's right there. There's some great stuff in there too, but I digress. Let's see, we've got and so the week after that, which is just, I just want to mention this again because it's getting you for more than a week, like I said, and I wish I could go with you, but you are flying to Alaska without me.
Correct. Yes.
And you're going to tell us what you're going to be doing when you get up there.
I've got 4 television interviews and 1 radio and an online blog. It's going to all take place in about 2.5 days. So it'll be a real stretch, a real sprint to get to all the venues on time, but should be fun. And one of the big distributors of Alaska has just started carrying my book, so very excited about that as well.
So I think we should talk about the book since we're talking about this. So you see the 70 Summits. So he started talking about it back in March, but the book came out on August 1st. It finally got released. We're both as a team very excited. Yay! Vern's excited. 70 Summits, Life in the Mountains. Lou Friedman co-authored this with Vern. And I'm going to throw it up over here in the chat. I have let me take this down for a second. I've got, Vern, tell us about the book, please.
This is
your life. Tell me about it.
This is 4 decades of stories, basically. Some of the highlights of my career, some lowlights as well. But it's a couple hundred pages of mountain stories, from the little things like surviving an avalanche to basically conquering the highest mountain in the world. There's lots of interest in
Norman
stories.
Vaughn.
Oh yes,
Norman Vaughn.
my favorite mentors and heroes. A man who taught the Pope how to mush dogs.
Oh, that's right. You told me that.
He had a mountain named after him by Admiral Byrd when he was in his 20s because he helped Admiral Byrd get to the South Pole. The admiral named a mountain Mount Vaughn, and he said, "Sir, I'm going to go climb that mountain someday." And everybody laughed because it was impossible for somebody. This is in the 20s, 1920s. It's impossible for somebody to go to Antarctica unless you were a major scientific expedition or had a government backing. But years later, 60 years later, he went back, and actually we were able to climb it together. I was his guide, and we took the final steps to the top. And he was so elated that he finally made it. He kissed me right there on top of my head.
I love it.
Anyway, a wonderful man. Lived to be 100 years old and was sort of the grandfather of all Alaska.
Mhm.
Many people knew him and loved him.
I was telling you that story. I met Norman Vaughn at the state fair. He used to have a booth at the Alaska State Fair, and he was promoting he wrote a book about his life, like a thinner flip picture book. And I bought that book, and I absolutely love the quote that's Norman's. Just so happened to be the same one that Vern put on his book, so I feel connected to this. Is dream big and dare to fail.
In honor of Norman, I've carried on this tradition of saying, dream big, dare to fail.
Dare to fail. For sure. So it's the book's on Amazon. It's Kindle and hard copy. Barnes and Noble, most places, books. Honestly, they always say more books are sold and all that. It's definitely, this link takes you to Amazon, but you can get other locations as well. So let's see. Somebody has requested to speak. Paul Greenberg. I think I'm going to let you speak. Again, I'm not really good at this, so I'm going to try and let you into the chat. So hopefully I'm handing the floor over if that's okay. So I don't know if maybe
there may be a 10-second delay.
That's very true. Very true. So it says no request pending, but let me go back into the chat here. I know we got some. Jeff Ragusa says, will you sign mine in Talkeetna next year?
Yes. Yes, I will, Jeff. I'd love to sign your book. So hopefully you can flag me down. I should be there middle of May. I'll be leading another Denali trip. It's already filled up. I get a lot of requests for that mountain. It's one of my favorite. It's the most beautiful mountain in the world. So when I come into town, I'll probably get there a couple of days early. Got a lot of Talkeetna is my spiritual home. So I always like to get there and spend a couple extra days before I go up on the mountain just to see old friends and have some good times.
We've got Dan Lean says, Vern, I'm halfway through your new book, but live in Arkansas. How do I get it signed?
Where in Arkansas are you from, Dan?
He'll probably pop into the chat here in a second. Yeah. Quasi says, any plan to come to the San Francisco Bay Area? That'd be fun.
Right now,
I'm reason to go to San Francisco.
I'm up the coast right now. I'm in Seattle, but I need time actually.
You need time.
Be in the mountains all winter long, so it's going to be very hard for me to get to the lower West Coast. But I'm fortunate I was able to climb on Rainier this next week, and then I'll be able to do some signings in town. But getting back to Arkansas, I will be in Arkansas on Thanksgiving up in the northwest corner. So if you live nearby, make way to Rogers, Arkansas. Drop me a line. I think you have lots of ways to get a hold of me. But if you can't, just go verntejas.com. I will get that, and I'll tell you where I am. Bring a book, and I'll sign it. I'll probably have a few books with me as well. So look forward to seeing you in Arkansas.
I've got a great question from Paul. He must know you. Paul Greenberg says, are you still fiddling?
Actually, Paul, things have changed a bit. I took a turn for the worst about 10 years ago, and picked up guitar, put down the fiddle, and I've been working on guitar for the last 10 years. But I still take it with me every time I go to the Khumbu, which is where I'm going on my next trip. When I leave for Nepal, I'll be carrying a guitar on the trail, playing it every day, all day long, much to the much to the torment of my trekkers. But if I get behind them, I notice they trek faster that way. But I can't do that with a fiddle. It's hard to play fiddle on the trail, but I can certainly play guitar on the trail. And it goes better with singing and harmonica playing, which I'm still doing, Paul. So
Vern, for those who don't know, tell them a little bit about Marty, and you know where I'm going.
Yeah, my good buddy, good buddy Marty Rainey from Alaska. He and I used to guide together. We used to work together on the North Slope. Then we started guiding together. Had lots of good adventures. Most recently, we were on the Ultimate Survival Alaska show for National Geographic together. Yep. We're on the same team. We got to run all over the mountains, through the woods, and crossing creeks, chasing bears. It was one of the more adventurous summers of my life. 3 months of running around, just having a blast in the mountains, in the water.
And Marty also plays an instrument. He's guitar, right?
Oh yeah, he's a great guitarist. He actually put out an album that I've got a track or two on as well on my harmonica. It's called "Strum It from the Summit." So if you can find a copy of that, grab a hold of it. But I think also some of that music's on Spotify. So feel free to do that. Get a hold of Marty Rainey, "Strum It from the Summit."
Nice. That's R-A-M-E-Y, right? Rainey?
Yeah, Rainey, R-A-N-E-Y.
Oh, N-E-Y. Okay. Yeah, Janice really enjoyed you and Marty on Ultimate Survival Show. Any chance you'll do it again? That was my question too. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how that happened. What's the relationship with National Geographic?
Well, National Geographic wound that show down, so it'll never be on that show again. You can still buy back copies of it. I think you can get a 3 CD set. Anyway, there's other things. Marty's still on TV. He's got a new show. He's doing Homestead Rescue.
That's right.
So check that out. And maybe you'll even get to hear him play guitar. He's quite the musician, singer-songwriter. Wonderful guy.
Nice. Dan Lean says he'll meet you in Rogers. Then he says, Little Rock, my buddy John and I met you on the banks of the Susitna River on May 19th. We were both headed to Denali.
Nice.
Is that the Big Sioux or the Little Sioux? Because now you're in my territory. I know where.
Exactly.
I'm from Wasilla. Don't tell anybody.
I know. Yeah, I remember meeting you. Excellent. I will be in Rogers for Thanksgiving, so maybe a day or two before Turkey Day would be good. My mom lives out on the lake. But you give me a call. I'll make sure we get that book signed for you.
Nice. Charles Edson says, any plan to visit the Northeast? So, but you're there now, aren't you?
I am in the Northeast. Most people don't realize it, but when I'm not spinning my wheels all over the world for about 2.5 months a year, at a week at a time, I drop back into New York. I'm in upstate New York, about 10 miles from Woodstock, in a little town called Socrates. And I did a show up in, right behind you. It's the poster for North Conway, Vermont. I think I would like to do one in Boston, and I'd like to do one in New York City. So we'll see what we can fit in my very, very tight schedule. But if I get a spare moment, I'll be trying to do one over at New Paltz, probably the weekend right after Thanksgiving at Rock and Snow. So if you know where Rock and Snow is, this is right where the Shawanagunks, so just outside of town. If you're a rock climber, you probably know. But Rock and Snow has agreed that we should do a talk and a signing together. So I'll do a show and a signing there. Probably the weekend after Thanksgiving. Probably not the I think that's the 26th, 25th, 26th. Probably not that one. The following weekend, because I think they're doing a big Thanksgiving sale then. But probably the next weekend. So get in touch with them if you're in the Northeast. That would be probably the only one I could say has got a leg to stand on right now with my tight schedule. But thanks for asking.
Nice. We've got let's see, Stuart is from Seattle, so hopefully, Stuart, we'll see you next week at one of the events. That'd be cool to get to meet you. We've got Greg says, clearly you're one of the most accomplished and famous guides of all time. For the up and coming younger generation of guides, who, in your opinion, would be the next leaders?
Oh, there's some really great guys I get to work with.
That's a great question, Greg. Thanks for asking.
There's quite a number of them. We've got an organization. We're about 100 guides deep at Alpine Ascent, so I could list off several of these guys that are just amazing. Seth Tampano is one of them. Very technically strong, good climber. Ben Jones for doing the big mountains. He's Choyu, Everest, Lhotse. We're really blessed with the younger crop of up and coming guides are fabulous. But it's a pleasure to work in an industry where everybody's outgoing and trying to do good by their fellow man. So it's we're givers, we're teachers, we're people who want to lead you to success. So there's a bunch of them, but just go through our roster.
Yeah. So Vern, if someone wanted to climb with you, if they're not familiar with Alpine, how would they do that?
They want to. Oh well, it's easy. I work predominantly for Alpine Ascents. Please just Google them. You'll get a link to our website. If you can't find something to climb on our website, you're jaded.
Yeah, there's a lot of climbs on your site.
100 possibilities between treks and climbs, and that would be the easiest way to get a hold of me. I think is right through the main office. If you have particular questions you want to address just to me, VernTejas.com would probably be the easy way to get to me.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I've tried to link up his social media really well. So there's a couple different emails. They all go to Vern, and I help make sure they get to him. So, but if they wanted to specifically climb with, they just call Alpine and say, I want to be on the next Vern guide.
Sure.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, you pretty much have to mention the name of the guide. So, but they will try to cater to your needs. So, which is great because if you're coming on one of my trips, I'm going to try to cater to you. So that's what we do. We give good guidance and try to make your trip successful and fun and a learning situation for you.
And how do you know where you're going? I mean, that sounded weird, but like when you get your monthly roster, I mean, are the mountains they're pre-assigned to you? And you just go climb this mountain?
The industry for 40 years has its perks, and one of them is I get seniority, figuratively, literally, but this actually allows me to pretty much choose the areas that I want to focus in. So right now I'm focusing Antarctica and Denali and and Elbrus. So I've got my three main areas of specialty expertise, and some of the other guides who have gotten to the senior guide status also get to pick the mountains that they want to work on.
Okay.
So it's great once you get the experience and the knowledge.
Janice asked, any chance you'll get to Austin, Texas? I don't think I asked that already. Are you going back to Austin?
Well, I'd love to. It might be a while. Because I'm running in circles. But Austin's a great town. My sister lives there. Love to get back down there and get some of that down home Austin City Limits music. And,
yeah.
But it's been literally a decade and a half since I've been down to Austin.
Then we have I think a final chat. People are wanting to go to bed probably, but just because it's kind of getting late. But Charles Edson says, that's about 2 hours from me. Great. Is this information posted online somewhere? I'm just east of the Hudson. Oh, okay. So he's like right there.
Yeah. We haven't. It's not a done deal yet for talking at Rock and Snow, but it's in the works. I'm also going to try to do a book signing in Saugerties, and maybe even over in across the river. I can't even remember the great big town. We got a lot of little towns here, but, and then also in Woodstock. So there's a couple that are in the works that I can't give you an exact date on because we haven't settled on it yet. It's going to have to fit into my very tight schedule. But, it'll be. We will make sure it gets online. So to answer your question,
yes, I'll make sure it gets everywhere. Well, Vern, we should probably take some final questions. We've gone over just a bit, so does anybody?
I'd like to just say these have been great questions. Ones that are show some thought and make me think.
Yeah.
So,
we still have quite a few people on. So does anybody have any final questions for Vern or anything you'd want to know? Please drop them in the chat. Charles says, thank you so much. You are welcome, Charles. We're happy to try and bring this to you. Oh my gosh. Let's see who else we got in here. I see. I meant to say earlier, there was, I don't know if she's still in the chat. Where'd she go? Let me find it here. We did that one. Someone sat next to you on an airplane.
Wow. Good memory.
Or something like that. Yeah. Anne said, how do you keep a PMA, a positive mental attitude? That's a great question.
The psychology.
Yeah.
I believe that climbing is 60% physical and 80% mental. It's really more important to have your head in the game than it is to be super trained out. So if you can't keep your head in the game, you're going to be out very soon. How do you do that? There's several different ways. One of the things is that I try to focus on the positive, accentuate the positive. I also try to visualize what my goal is before I get there. Is like I visualize making the final steps onto the summit and then celebrating back down below. I don't want it just to be a one-way trip.
I hope not.
There's a little bit of the train that he thinks he can. I think I can. Yeah. There's that kind of mantra that's going on in my mind while I'm doing these climbs. At the same time, you've got to balance it with that conservative decision-making process. But believing in yourself is very difficult for people to do until they start doing it and then you see the positive coming from it. So taking the first steps is real important to faking it till you make it, that kind of thing.
Yep.
You got to believe you can. That's part of that positive mental attitude. Make yourself believe you can do it. Start doing it and then continue doing it, taking one step at a time. Try not to get overwhelmed by how big the mountain is.
Right.
But just if you can take that next step, take it. And then if you can take the next one, take it. And then you're going to find that eventually these little successes lead to the big success. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
I love that one too. Yep.
So just break it down to components and don't let your worries take over. Don't let the negative part of your mind take over. How do you do that? You just force yourself to it.
You force yourself through it, right?
I mean, staying positive.
Go ahead. Priya had a question. She said, Vincent was my favorite. Any plans to guide Logan in Canada?
Uh, Logan, excellent. Somebody asked me recently about doing Logan. Uh, I I think it's a wonderful mountain. I did the first winter ascent of Logan a long time ago. I think it was '86, maybe it was '82. It was a long time ago. But it's it's a very straightforward mountain, and it's underrated because it's not the highest on the continent. It's the second highest, but it has worse weather, and it's much more remote than Denali is. Denali will have 20 planes flying around it in an hour, whereas Logan, maybe a plane flies about it once a day, maybe
Oh wow.
even less. So Logan, in my mind, is a good challenge, quite reasonable to climb it. I'd love to guide it if you're interested. Drop me a line. I'd love to go back to it. It's a beautiful mountain.
Paul Greenberg says, what month on Aconcagua to best avoid El Viento Blanco?
Ooh, a good question. It seems like it can
Maybe I
do.
mean do my
Yeah,
Spanish.
the big winds can come up anytime, but I find that it seems like it's windier early in the season. So I typically go later in the season. That said, I've been pinned down in the late season too. Uh, the nice thing about going later in the season, when I say late, I'm talking February. Uh, February, the price drops, but also the temperatures drop, and you better chance you're going to see snow, which makes the mountain a lot more alpine and more lovely. It covers the dust and makes me feel like I'm really climbing a high mountain. Uh, but I have been swatted down by the wind a couple of times in February, so I think it can do it anytime it wants to. But for my money, I'd rather do it late in the season rather than uh, early
Okay.
season. Seems to be when I've heard the worst horror stories about the wind.
We got Jose says, Vern, I live in Houston, Texas.
All right, hola.
So I don't have access to mountains to train. So
I understand. That's where I
living proof.
grew up.
He says, what other type of training do you recommend to prepare for high altitude mountains?
Okay, whatever, Jose, is good for your legs and lungs. So running is going to be excellent. Uh, Bicycling, excellent. The swimming. I think for me, the one that I like the most is cycling without sitting down. So you could actually take your seat off your bicycle. If you have to stand up on your pedals the whole time, your legs are going to get really, really strong. And if you're racing around, I know Houston's probably not the best town to be riding bicycles in, but I think there's some bike trails maybe along the bayou that you could get out and do, 10, 20 miles. If you're on the pedals the whole time, your legs are going to get big and your lungs are going to get big. It's just a real good form of training. There's not too many hills, but if you can find some, go up and down the hills as well. That way you get some anaerobic exercise as well, which I think is one of the best ways to actually adapt your body to low oxygen environments is to run sprints, wind sprints, so that you actually just right on the verge of passing out is actually a really good training for. No, it's true. It's it's it's
Aaron
stimulating.
agrees. Aaron's over
It
here.
stimulates being at a high altitude. So good
Um,
question. Houston's hard.
that's a great question. David says, Vern, I climbed Denali with you last year following my dad's passing a month prior. Oh, thank you for so much for the continued motivation and positivity. How have you been able to keep such a strong PMA for so long? So I think you might have answered that one. Well, that's a different question. What keeps you going? I guess that's the question.
I think it's about enjoying life.
Crazy.
It has to do with my desire to teach, but it has to do with my desire to stay fit. It's do things that you enjoy doing, and I'm very fortunate because my job is my passion. I love the mountains, and therefore I had to figure out some way I could spend more time there. That means I had to start working in some way I could be in the mountains. So guiding was a natural for me. It helps to feel like you're blessed, and certainly I'm blessed to get to do what I love to do with interesting people all over the world. So that success breeds more success, and I think once you start on a very positive note, it's easy to continue having positive things happen in your life. It's like a snowball. It gains momentum and it gets bigger and bigger. And I've been very fortunate, uh, you know. But I think you kind of have to fake it till you make it at the beginning. You just have to believe it's going to have a happy ending and keep working. It's not going to do it itself. You have to work hard, but you just keep pushing the ball in the right direction, and eventually it gets some momentum on its own, and it just keeps happening. I mean, I'm so lucky to have people saying, "Hey, you want to go do Logan? You want to go do these mountains?" It's hard at times, though. Life is full of disappointments and suffering. My sister just got flooded in Houston. It's challenging. Hard to keep your head up, but if we don't, we just end up crying all the time. So, it's challenging. I know, but push that ball in the right direction and keep working.
We've got 2 final questions. So I think if anybody has any last minute, let me know, but I've got 2 I'm going to read from Andrew and Greg. And then Jean says, thanks, Vern, happy trails. So thanks, Jean.
Thank you, Jean, for
Andrew's got one. He says, do you have anything special with your diet to help you with your performance and longevity in climbing? So maybe supplements, maybe it's a supplement question.
Not so much supplements for myself. I eat a lot. I'm very active. Some people would say I'm a little hyperkinetic, but I eat a lot more food than most people would. But I'm an omnivore. However, that question, interestingly, is we're just having a discussion tonight. It seems to be going more plant-based, even though I love meat. I'm finding that fish is a better form of animal product for me. So I've been focusing. I just had salmon tonight. I'm probably eating fish 3 times a week, maybe 4 times a week now. Getting away from red meats. Chicken I love, but that's not a red meat, fortunately. But I've noticed I'm drifting to a more plant-based diet. Part of it's as we age, our body needs different things, and I'm still pushing hard. But at 64 years old, things starting to change. I'm losing muscle mass, my testosterone's dropping. There's all sorts of crazy things going on, and so diet has become more of a concern. It's like, how am I going to maintain the nutrition I need and the variety that I crave, and do it in such a way that I can maintain that when I'm on the road, when I'm in the mountains, and when I'm at home. So challenging, but it's like everything. Do what you can as often as you can, and hopefully you'll get everything you need.
And then we'll round it out. Greg has a really great question. I'll be interested to see your response on this one. Are you concerned that on Everest, some climbers are being accepted on guided teams, but really don't have adequate experience?
Yes, age-old challenge.
Right?
Yeah, it's a conundrum because if everybody had lots of experience, they wouldn't need a guide. So when they come to a guide, they're asking for our experience. So we're trying to give them. I try to give my people, 40 years of experience, in a couple of weeks, which is way too short of a time.
Right.
On Everest, of course, it's a couple of months. But there are people who come up there who didn't take their training seriously. It's a quandary for us. Is how much do you give these people if they don't have the experience to keep from getting frostbitten? They don't know what hypothermia is. They've never been exhausted before. These are things that are going to bite them in the butt.
Is there a
So for us, we actually try to make sure that we screen them, that they've gotten some experience under their belt first. We always like to see them go up Denali. We like to see them go up Aconcagua. Not just climb, put their foot on it, but actually summit, go to the top, and then enjoy you. So these are our prerequisites. And most honest people, if they're going to spend that kind of time and money, they're going to get the training they need. They're going to have the experience level they need. Otherwise, they're really stacking the cards against them for getting to the top. So most people are pretty honest about it, but you always have some people who underestimate the mountain and overestimate their abilities and their training level. So it's a quandary. As a guide, we're always trying to maximize somebody's dream potential without putting their life in danger. So it's a real tight balance. They can have a lot to do with that equation by getting the experience, background, and getting the training they need before they come to a big mountain like Everest.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Anybody else? That's it. I don't see anybody else. Let's get some reverb.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Sonny, for doing an amazing job of hosting this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You did an excellent job. I think what we need to do is make sure that the print on their questions is larger, so you don't have to lean in and
That's a Sunny thing. Yeah, that's a Sunny thing. I'm just my eyes need to be checked.
But maybe we can get it in bigger text.
Bigger text. Yep. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for coming out tonight. I'll send out another follow-up email, like I said, with the links to the webinar replay is going to auto-generate. But I'll send out a second email that's got the link to 70 summits and a link to the ebook. And then you guys are on our special list too. So for on our subscribers list. So I'll be doing some blog posts for Vern when we get, where are you going after Alaska again? I'm trying to keep up.
I'm right off to Nepal. I have one day.
Oh, you are. You're going
between Alaska and Nepal, and I'm gone for 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Jean says, thanks, Vern. Happy trails. Art Alameda says, thanks, Vern. Wonderful talk. Thank you, Vern. Danny, great job. Thank you. Greg, really great. Thanks to you both. Thank you very much. Alberto, thanks so much for the webinar. I love it. See?
Hey, guys. Thank you for the
Give
great
it up for Vern.
We really appreciate that.
Everybody clap for Vern. Yay. Thanks, you guys, for coming out. The replay will be available